probably shouldn't make that video. Should I make that video? So, against my better judgment, I am here to talk about my thoughts on violence in TTRPG systems and games. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I hope that you view this video as not a definitive position or argument, but as an invitation to do some thinking, take these ideas, ruminate on them, bring your own ideas to the conversation. So I think that we have made an assumption that non-combat oriented games are not violent. And I think that we have made that assumption and we have not analyzed it, we have not broken down that assumption, and we have not even realized that we have made that assumption. So I think that the criticism of TTRPG games being steeped in violence is valid, but I think that the conversation is more nuanced than combat bad, play other games. So, let's take a step back and let's talk about violence and combat. I think those are connected ideas, but I think they are not always, I think that they can be distinct. So, in my opinion, and I want to highlight that Scene 4 pointed out that violence can be defined or described as limiting or denial of choice and agency. That probably wasn't the wording used, but that's the wording that is in my head right now. So, and I'm going to expand that thought to the purpose of violence. And I think often the purpose of violence is to impress your own will onto a person or a situation by removing or reducing choice. Now this is distinct from the dictionary definition of violence as physical harm. So I do want to point out that when you talk about violence as physical harm, that's a slightly different conversation, but I'm bringing more to this conversation than just thinking about it in terms of physical harm. So I think that violence, impressing one's own will onto a person or situation by removing or reducing choice, I think that happens all the time. I think it happens all the time in games. I think it happens all the time in real life, even when no one dies or no one gets maimed. We are always trying to influence the situations around us and the world around us. And does that mean that we are always enacting violence? No. But it does mean that we have to be mindful of how we might be enacting violence. It is very easy to not recognize when we are enacting violence. In my opinion, if we are upholding, reinforcing systems of oppression, systems that limit and deny choice and agency, that can be considered violence. If we are upholding colonialism, white supremacy, patriarchy, etc., if we are upholding that in the way that we walk through the world, that is violence. And I think that in our games, unless our games are completely unrecognizable to the world in which we presently live, they are built on top of those systems of violence, and they have those threads underlying the narratives. Now, do I think that that is always a negative? I think that it is important that we tell stories that mean something to us, and sometimes that is bringing those things into the conversation, into the narratives, so that we can deal with them. It is also valid to try to remove those things to have a better experience at our gaming tables, create better experiences for our players. And so sometimes when we remove or limit things from our games, it is limiting the most egregious expressions of violence. And sometimes that is combat, but sometimes the most egregious expressions of violence might be social systems. And that's something I'm not going to give you a definitive answer on that. I don't have one. But I want you to think about it. And think about what it means for your games. And I want to leave you with this thought that it is good to deconstruct why your games have combat. It is also good to recognize that violence may be pervasive in our games, and it is important not to just take these narrative aspects and label them as bad. It is important to not just say, okay, combat, bad, that's negative. We need to just have less combat-oriented games. But we need to ask ourselves, why? Why do we want combat in our games? What does this do for us? For me, I think that sometimes having combat in my games is an expression of being able to take back agency. Anyway, I'm starting to ramble, and we're going on 8+ minutes. So I'm going to leave you with that because I don't have any more thought out ideas to bring to this at this moment. So let me know what you think.